What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the weekend, we did have too many games, and some of the members of the Spawncast attended, and we had a full panel, and shout out to everyone who came by. It was a blast. Got to meet a lot of you, and I think next year, we're going to try to get the entirety of the Spawncast to come out, which does include RGT85, who actually called into the live panel through Discord, but looking forward to next year to do it all over again. Today, though, we have a bunch of stuff to go over, which includes confirmation of the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy being remastered, as well as a sales update for Metroid Dread, showing that it's off to a pretty fast start. And we're also going to talk about Jim Ryan mentioning that he wants to be able to reach hundreds of millions of gamers, potentially even outside of PlayStation. We'll go over that today, guys. If you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Virtuous and Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake. At least that's the rumor currently going around, and it looks like we may have some more evidence that's been spotted to kind of back up this claim. We can see this tweet here, posted up by Faison, who says, so Virtuous Studios working on Remake, according to this LinkedIn profile. Probably Metal Gear Solid 3. Previously, it's been reported by Andy Platonic at VGC. They had the original report on that. AAA action-adventure remake. Looks like ground-up remake. 4K for certain platforms. This, you can see the LinkedIn posting here from Virtuous, and we're kind of linking this to that report. It doesn't say Metal Gear Solid 3, which they wouldn't post up the name of the title, the game itself anyway, as they are, of course, under NDA and all of this. But the thing I'm still concerned about with Konami, it makes sense that they would go to Virtuous to do it, but I am concerned with them playing around with a classic from the Metal Gear Solid series after what we saw from Metal Gear Survive. It seems, at least from what we're seeing here, it's been in development for years now, and hopefully they understand the gravity of the situation around taking that game that gamers look back on fondly, bringing it up and doing a full remake, potentially moving around more than just the visuals. We'll see if that's the case here. Again, no indication this is absolutely Metal Gear Solid 3, but it certainly lines up with the most recent report. Also, the Nintendo Switch OLED model did release on Friday, and people were unboxing it and noticed something on the screen, so much so that we have something from Nintendo, almost a disclaimer explaining what's going on there. We can see this over on The Verge, where they say, do not peel off the anti-scattering adhesive film from the OLED screen of the console. Now, on top of that OLED screen, if you kind of look at it, you'll see what appears to be almost like a screen protector. Like, for example, you maybe unbox your phone, you take a look at it, you peel that plastic off. Very satisfying, of course, to do that. But if you look at the OLED screen on the Switch, it almost looks like it has that. But what it really is kind of this film over top of a glass screen, so that if it does break, you won't have a bunch of shards of glass get out and like stab you and all of this. So no, don't try to peel that off. Leave it. You won't even notice it because it's so thin, and the OLED will shine through it completely. In fact, I would still recommend having some sort of like hard screen protector, one that could take most of the impact, say if it gets dropped, and hopefully save the OLED and that film. Oh, and we had previously talked about Marvel's Avengers coming to Game Pass, but looks like there was another update. This one not going over so well with the player base, as it has to do with the cash shop and consumables. We can see this over at gamesindustry.biz, quoting Crystal Dynamics directors, producers, all of that working on it, where they said, we've committed that content purchasable with real money in Marvel's Avengers will be aesthetic-only additions, which will ensure we can keep the game fresh for years to come. This was in a blog post back in 2020. Then in March 2021, what they did was they changed the experience needed to level up so that it was increased, basically taking longer to get to the end game or max level. And most recently, they've updated to include experience boosters that you can buy with real money. Seems pretty planned out to me overall, and I can understand why. You look back on that and you say, well, it was supposed to be all like cosmetic stuff, and now there are things that can essentially fast track you more so to the end of the game that's kind of set up artificially through more experience being added per level. Not a great look here for this Marvel's Avengers game that's had a rough start, but maybe that's why they had to do it, considering it does not appear like it's been a massive financial success. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the confirmation of the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy being remastered, that being Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. What happened was Rockstar just put out a tweet along with kind of an update on their website, a press release, and we can see this tweet here absolutely exploded online. I think there's a lot of excitement that we're getting something. I mean, it's kind of new, right? we've been dealing with Grand Theft Auto 5 for so long. Even the older Grand Theft Autos are starting to look new right now. But this tweet here, like I said, exploded online, almost 350,000 likes. It's a video essentially going through the different Grand Theft Auto games, then eventually culminating in the Grand Theft Auto, the trilogy, the definitive edition. Yes, but we can see that here. And then we also have an update over on the Rockstar Games website where they say, in honor of the upcoming anniversary, today we're excited to announce that all 3 games will be coming to current generation platforms later this year in Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition for PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X, S, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Rockstar Games Launcher on PC. Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition will feature across-the-board upgrades, including graphical improvements and modern gameplay enhancements for all 3 titles, while still maintaining the classic look and feel of the originals. We're extremely excited to share more about these groundbreaking titles in the coming weeks. Stay tuned. Now, we also had some retail listings for this game go up, so people are looking at this as potentially being like a full-priced $60 or $70 game based on the platform that you pick it up on. But these are just, again, placeholder listings. We'll see more about the price as we get, I guess, closer to its full reveal here in a couple of weeks. We are coming up on that 20th anniversary in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. I feel like we're going to find out everything about this game in 2 weeks, then they're going to launch it in November, so that would make a lot of sense there. But it is cool to see Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas go to a Nintendo platform for the first time. Yeah, this would technically be history for the Grand Theft Auto series on a Nintendo system with the Switch. We had Chinatown Wars on the DS, but it's never gone to a home console from Nintendo. Now, I am really curious as to, I guess, the modern updates that they're going to do. There were rumors that they were putting it into something like Unreal Engine 4, which I'm sure would enable them to then bring it forward as we go along, because let's be real, they're probably gonna look to port these to the next system, like the PS6 and the next Xbox and the next Nintendo platform. As we've seen with Grand Theft Auto 5, Rockstar likes to, of course, along with Take-Two, continue to move these along rather than make the Grand Theft Auto 6, which we'll see about that, I guess, in 2024 at this point. But this is exciting because we are seeing at least something come out of Rockstar outside of Grand Theft Auto Online updates and another version of GTA 5, which they did mention Grand Theft Auto Online having updates going along here over the coming weeks, where it looks like they're preparing for a big event around this anniversary. And I did realize there are a lot of people who probably came into the gaming space and just immediately went to Grand Theft Auto Online and Grand Theft Auto 5 and have never played the older ones. And really, if they're playing Grand Theft Auto Online or 5 and then they look back at some of the older games that are available on like the PS4, for example, they're looking at that saying, yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with GTA 5 because, yeah, it does still look like a PS2 game. So this makes sense for Rockstar and Take-Two. It also worked as a bit of a gap filler as they work towards Grand Theft Auto 6 in it's like 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's weird because we're talking about Grand Theft Auto 5 being delayed to the PS5. So you go back, 2013 when it came out, and you're like, in 8 years, that's gonna be delayed again onto the PS5. You thought you were crazy, but looking forward to finding out more about this, what graphical updates they have, and what modernized features, I guess, they have for gameplay in the coming weeks, and then we'll find out about the release date. Next up, let's talk about Metroid Dread, as it did release on Friday. I was at the convention over the weekend. I didn't really have a chance to play it much. I wanted to, but I got the Switch OLED. I did a teardown that should be going up here in the next day or so on the channel. Got it back together, and I didn't get a chance to transfer anything over. So I'm going to be playing Metroid Dread all week, but it does look like it's off to a pretty good start. We can see this over on Twitter. This from Christopher Dring, this at gamesindustry.biz, saying Metroid Dread is the biggest launch for the franchise in UK chart history, beating Metroid Prime 3 Corruption on Wii by a good margin. And this is without digital downloads. Goes on to say Metroid is a smaller franchise for Nintendo. It is the 5th biggest Switch launch of the year, behind Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, Zelda Skyward Sword, Monster Hunter Rise, and New Pokemon Snap. I was seeing that New Pokemon Snap came in right around 26,000 copies sold, again, physically on release for that week. So somewhere, I guess, below 26,000 is where we'd be seeing Metroid Dread right now in the UK, but that technically being the best-selling Metroid right now out of the gate in the UK is at least one checkbox done here. I mean, I was expecting it to do well enough in the UK to beat out the other Metroid games. The big challenge, like I said, is going to be in Japan. And the good news there is we will have just solid numbers, like hard numbers on that later on this week, down to like the single copy of Metroid Dread. And that's where we're going to be turning our attention to see The chance, I guess, this game has at something like 3 million, 3,000,001 copies, if, say, Metroid Dread is above 50,000 in Japan in its opening week here, tracked by Famitsu, I think it has a really good chance of hitting over 3 million. If it's over 100,000 copies, Sean might as well start playing Balan Wonderworld immediately. And we'll certainly be going over the numbers here for Metroid Dread when they come out with Famitsu. I think it's like Wednesday or Thursday, alongside of the Switch OLED, which will be tracked as well. And the Switch sales in the past few weeks really haven't slowed that much, considering technically a new model was coming out. So I'll be curious to see if we have a bit of a spike in overall sales that could then also help to pull up Metroid Dread in Japan. But there was something else that happened with Metroid that people were a bit concerned could be affecting the sales, as Kotaku posted an article that became very controversial online. You can see this here. It says Metroid Dread is already running on Switch emulators. And this is factual information. It is running on Switch emulators now. There are videos all over the place. And I'd even mention to you guys that people had the game early. It leaked online. They were posting it up with like hacked switches, and apparently emulators were running it. But the strange thing about this article here is people are seeing it as Kotaku like kind of nudging you towards just pirating the game and playing it on your PC rather than buying it like you normally would and play it on your Switch. And that's the only thing I can think of when it comes to the reaction to that Kotaku article, because Nintendo Life covered the same exact thing, saying Nintendo Switch exclusive Metroid Dread is already being emulated on PC. However, they took a different tone with the overall idea of having Metroid Dread, downloading it from the internet, and then playing it on your PC over buying the game itself and supporting it. Which of course then starts the venture into the legality of emulators and ROMs and all the. Technically, emulators that we see right now online for the Switch are completely illegal. Like, they've been building it out with their own code, and they haven't been using code that Nintendo has that they've copywritten and all these different things. So the emulator itself is perfectly fine to have. It's just the idea that Metroid Dread just came out and people are pirating it and downloading it and then playing it without, of course, buying the game is a problem for a franchise that we're already trying to see if it can break the 3 million mark, because that would then make it the best-selling game in its franchise. Think about it, 3 million copies, and then you look at Nintendo's best-selling list for the Switch, and we're talking like 20 million copies to get in that, just in the conversation. I mean, look at Mario Kart being over like 34 million or something like. So we're just talking about 3 million for Metroid, and you kind of see how people are annoyed that this is starting to go around, as people would look to just pirate the game and not technically support a franchise that really needs the support. And we're gonna touch on this a bit more because I did ask something related to the idea of downloading ROMs for our poll. But do I think that this Kotaku article will really affect Metroid Dread sales that much, because all of a sudden everyone's gonna go and just download it and then emulate it? Not really, no. I think the idea here is Metroid Dread needs to appeal to a wider audience that probably isn't even into emulating. The reason that things like Mario Party sells way more than it should, despite all of us looking at it and saying, wow, it has no online, it lacks like a lot of content, and it still sells 12, 13, 14 million copies, is because the mainstream buys in. People who don't really look online for a lot of this stuff, and that's what Metroid Dread needs to be able to do, just to break 3 million copies. So, like I said, it's a controversial article, and the idea that these new releases are just immediately able to be emulated, but I don't think it's going to affect the potential sales for Metroid Dread overall, because if it is going to sell 3 million copies, it has to appeal to an audience that's really not looking for that anyway. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an interview that Jim Ryan had with GamesIndustry.biz, where they kind of discussed the future of PlayStation, the PS5, and really their, I guess, their plan and their roadmap sort of for this generation that they've set up with Jim Ryan at the helm of PlayStation. We can see this quote, though, during that interview, where he says, "I'd like to see a world where the games that we make at PlayStation can be enjoyed by many tens of millions of people, perhaps hundreds of millions of people." Now, he doesn't exactly say how they would do hundreds of millions of people with a PS5. Now, the PS4, right around 120 million or so sold through to consumers. And you hear hundreds of millions, you're like, well, if it matched the PS4, it wouldn't technically be hundreds of millions. If it matched the PS2, it wouldn't be. It would have to be several generations all piled together to do that. But you know what this is reminding me of? Kind of how Phil Spencer is talking about the audience of 2 billion gamers, and the way they would do that is through cloud gaming, or basically releasing games outside of just a console, a box that you buy. Because yeah, there is a limit on how many people out there are even that interested in buying a console overall. In fact, it's been talked about that for the most part, console sales have basically just shifted around between the three companies. It hasn't really grown that much in terms of how many boxes are being sold every generation. So it does make me wonder, as we've seen with PlayStation releasing on things like PC, they have had some interest in cloud gaming. If they are thinking about, okay, how can we expand outside of just the PlayStation 5 itself? Could they get to a point where they have a launcher on PC that allows them to collect the bulk of the revenue, not have to pay, say, 30% to Steam, and they just have many of their PlayStation releases there ready to go day one on PC? Would they look into doing cloud gaming like we see with Microsoft through their own game streaming, or xCloud with Game Pass Ultimate? There are a lot of possibilities here, but the way Jim Ryan is talking about this makes it sound like he has to look at the bigger picture that maybe kind of ventures outside of just the PS5. But we'll see a bit more about this as the generation evolves and see what PlayStation's strategy when it comes to PC gaming continues to do. Because if we get to a point where they have some sort of live service game, just as an example to try out to start with, that releases on the PC and PS5 at the same time, I think that'll give us a pretty good indication of the future for PlayStation. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a little poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, have you ever downloaded a ROM of a game that you don't own? 80% said yes, I've done it at least once. 20% said no, I always buy a copy legitimately first. So this is an interesting one, because I feel like most people have just downloaded a game that they don't own, whether they want to try it out or even play through like a ROM hack or a translation. I remember back in the day, especially on like the Super Nintendo, like ZSNES, there were so many games that were just not coming over. They were just in Japan, like Dragon Ball Z Hyper Dimension or Legend of Super Saiyan. Big Dragon Ball Z fan, right, at the time. It just see it on Toonami constantly. I'm like, wow, they have Super Nintendo games for this? And you weren't able to get them. So yeah, you go online, you start downloading and play them through with like terrible translations. It's like, what else can you do? And Nintendo has been pretty poor about having their legacy titles available, and we're seeing that with Sony and like PlayStation now as we've gone along for like PS3 titles where you can't even play that on your main system. So it's tough when it gets down to it. But really, I look at this poll and I just feel like probably everyone, or at least most people, have at some point gone to online and been like, maybe I will just download that Pokemon game or this random Super Nintendo game that I've never heard of before and check it out. But when it comes to something like Metroid Dread and it releasing day one, but then also being available online to download and then emulate, yeah, I think it's much more appropriate to support the developers and the publisher who created the game and is actually trying to sell it right then and there, as opposed to legacy software that, I mean, let's face it, while they say copyright and all of this, they're not looking to make any money on. In fact, the ones who are making the money are the people on eBay and Amazon and pawn shops who are marking it up substantially anyway. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Tony saying, oh man, I love demo discs. It's how I discovered Crash 2, Armored Core, Legend Dragoon, and Bloody Roar. That was the best part about demo discs, is you would get one in a magazine, no clue what's on it. You'd pop it in, you might find a hidden gem just on the demo disc. It was so cool. The one I remember the most was Omega Boost. This PS1 game. It was such a cool idea at the time because I was, Gundam Wing and all stuff was on TV, and I'm like, wow, this is cool. You're in space, you're locking on and shooting these lasers and missiles everywhere, and it was just on a random demo disc, and I remember I went to my local rental store, and they had a big bin of PS1 games. I wish I could travel back in time and go through it now, because Omega Boost is like $2 or something, but that's just one of many that I discovered through a random demo disc I got in a magazine. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy remasters. How far do you think they're gonna take it, and when do you think it's coming out? Also, what about PlayStation attempting to get hundreds of millions of gamers on board? How do they do that? And then Metroid Dread off to a fast start, but will it pass 3 million? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.